Alright, after a very lengthy delay, it's finally time to go over Tier 6 in Canary Pack. And thank you to the people who asked what was happening with it. It's just been a case of me not having time. These videos take a very long time to record. And there were also some other reasons. There were a couple of pets on this tier that I wanted to change. I've not made as many changes as I would have liked to. There's probably going to be a lot of dubious numerical values in this one. It gets harder and harder to set those values realistically when you get to the high tiers. But without further ado, let's just start with corn here, which is the only new food item on tier 6. We've got pizza and pita bread. So summon 2 random 4/4 pets of a lower tier after fainting. So this is just your basic late game summon enabler. You know, we only have a honey way back on tier 1, and I think everything else doesn't really have anything to do with summons. So this is going to kind of be like Stork and Popcorn, of course, as well. But instead of summoning from the same tier like Popcorn, it's a lower tier. So you're going to get more value out of it if you put it on higher tier units. But you can also use it on anything to trigger ejects deliberately. So, you know, if you put this on a unit right at the front, especially a unit that already summons something, then you can end up triggering multiple ejects when that pet faints immediately. So where do we start with the tier 6s here? Now, there are a lot of dinosaurs and prehistoric creatures, so I'm sure some of the pronunciations will be a bit dodgy. But I guess we'll start here with Plesiosaur. And I think this is kind of like Sauropod. I've just used what Scave called this in the Discord. I guess this is more like a generic term for lots of different creatures, but we'll just leave it as is. Same as Sauropod in the main game. So this is our mammoth equivalent. Faint, give 2 random friends +3 attack and +4 health. So instead of applying to the entire team, it's more concentrated. And that allows you to do a couple of different things. One of the problems with Mammoth, although Mammoth is one of my favorite units, is you basically have to play it at the front every time. Whereas with this, you're only giving buffs to a couple of units, so you could theoretically play it much further along the team, you know, all the way back to position 3 maybe. And of course, it is going to be very useful for some of the resummoning builds. So with the Angelfish, we could resummon Plesiosaur at the back, and then have it be automatically fainted by the Red Wolf. So next up we'll go to Therizinosaurus. I hope that's right. I believe this one was actually included in the movie Jurassic Park Fallen Kingdom, although I think again they made quite a lot of changes. My initial assumption was that it was quite aggressive, but I don't think that's the case, and so I kind of changed its ability. So it's before attack, remove the backmost enemy perk, works 1 time per battle. Now, the funny thing about this is that in the interim, because it's taken me so long to do this, they've actually released a new pet on the test server, not a new pet, rather, a new food, the Baguette, which actually allows you to remove perks from the frontmost unit on the opposing team, which is probably a lot better than this. But I wanted it to be backmost here, mostly for thematic reasons. You know, we're imagining its long limbs reaching right to the back of the opposing team and stealing the perk, or removing the perk rather. So it doesn't steal it the same way as these do, it just removes it. So I think there are a couple of things here. Obviously this is not as strong as Raccoon. Raccoon ended up getting moved to customs because it was just way too strong, and it's a tier 5 still as well. But I'm trying to ignore kind of extremely strong pets when I'm creating these new abilities. I'd rather create something that was a bit more sensible. So removing the backmost enemy perk, yeah, it's probably not going to be as useful as stealing the front perk. But I like the idea of this creature reaching right to the back of the opposing team and taking something away. Now, of course, we can also manipulate the backmost perk. You might use Snipes plus the Bullfrog or the Snowy Owl to remove perks or cover over perks from the back of the opposing team with ailments. And then when you're removing the backmost perk, it might actually end up being one closer to the front. Or you could maybe just decide to play this closer to the back, maybe have it buffed by Plesiosaur. And then when there are fewer units left on the opposing team, then you're more likely to remove the frontmost perk. And next up is the obligatory tier 6 snake. So we've got the Rattlesnake, 2 friends ejected, deal 3 damage to the opposite enemy. Now the damage here is quite low, but and originally this only said 1 friend ejected, but I think it's going to be pretty easy to do that and end up triggering this a ton of times. So I made it 2 friends ejected, kind of similar to Vulture. But of course you can imagine these numbers being higher if you think this is too low. The other 2 tier 6 snakes are obviously friend ahead attacks. So I think that kind of niche is already well and truly covered. And with the addition of all the jump pets, these are probably stronger than ever. So I really wanted to have an endpoint as well for the eject builds. And we will have another one coming up soon. All right, here's an example with a couple of teams using some of these new tier 6 units. So on the left, we have an eject team with double rattlesnake. And on the right, we have a plesiosaur resummon team with angelfish. So the first thing that's going to happen here is the Nautilus is going to try and detect what type of team the opposing build is. Now, although there are 3 summon units here, I think this would be interpreted as a snipe team since we have 2 tier 6 snipers. And we also have triple dragon fruit. I wonder if the perks could be involved in determining archetype as well. But for the sake of this example, let's say that this is interpreted as a snipe team. So the Nautilus is going to give potato to the units behind it. And then on this side, we have both the Locust and the Dilophosaurus, which are going to trigger ejects at start of battle because there's no space. So a bunch of Locusts are going to go flying off the screen. Same thing for Dilophosaurus, which is going to result in both rattlesnakes firing multiple times. Now they are targeting the opposite enemy, so they're going to hit these 2. Now hopefully that means that the potato is going to do good stuff and block a bunch of snipes. But they are going to hit this Nautilus, and the dragon fruit is going to result in snipes going back the other way. So we're probably going to get a bit of snipe ping pong with shots going backwards and forwards. And then once the battle begins, the 2 units at the front are going to clash. Let's say they both get fainted, so we'll remove both the coyote and the plesiosaur. Now the coyote had corn, so it is going to try and summon a roadrunner. Actually, I'm just looking, I don't think we have a roadrunner here, do we? Alright, quick bit of movie magic to add the roadrunner. Now roadrunner is going to be summoned into the empty slot, and then the corn is going to try and spawn 2 tier 1s, but there isn't any space, so they would get ejected as well. Now that would trigger the snakes, but I think first we'll process what's going to happen on this side. So the plesiosaur fainted. It's going to give some stats to these units randomly. And then the angelfish is going to re-summon it at the back. So we'll move everything forwards. And where is it? Plesiosaur comes back in the last slot. Now if the red wolf is high enough level, it's going to instantly attack its own teammate, and the plesiosaur is going to get fainted again. Give more stats to the team. Now it may get resummoned again if the angelfish was high enough level, but let's just say that we stop the loop here. The snakes fire again because of the extra ejects, and maybe they do some more damage, maybe they kill something, but I'm just going to leave it as is. And then we get to the clash here. So the roadrunner actually would run to the back. So its ability is to run away before it attacks. So it's actually going to move to the back, and everything is going to move forwards. So we'll just do it this way. I really didn't make it easy for myself with some of these abilities for the examples. And now a clash would actually happen at the front. The Therizinosaurus is going to remove the backmost perk. So we're going to get rid of this pita bread on the Locust, which may well be the biggest unit on the opposing team. And then the fight would proceed from there. There's actually a decent chance that some of these perks would have already been removed based on some of the random snipes. So the Therizinosaurus could have actually removed a perk closer to the front. So we've had our obligatory snake. Let's do our obligatory tier 6 scalar, and that is going to be the lyrebird. So gain gold, give a random friend +1 attack and +2 health permanently, works 3 times per turn. Now again, this is one where numerically I have no idea where it should be. I think clearly this is going to be worse than Bird of Paradise. But again, I don't want to try and match ability strength to pets that are probably way too strong as they are. But the idea behind this is to try and make the gold teams a little bit more interesting. This is kind of going to be like Axolotl, where it's passing out buffs as things happen in battle, which I think is just overall more interesting than the shop. But of course you can use this in the shop. Both the gold generators in the pack are going to be able to trigger in the shop. But also you can just sell something, because that is going to cause you to gain 1 gold. That's partly why we've got the triggers here. I didn't want to make it possible to just have multiple lyrebirds and then buy, sell your way to a gigantic squad. I think that's pretty uninteresting. But I think since Axolotl has come in, everyone likes the idea of gaining stats permanently in battle. And so nice to have another way to do that. Next up we'll go to Ankylosaurus. I hope that's correct. I think I said this completely differently when I was a kid. So this is after attack, deal 3 damage to adjacent pets. So this is our tier 6 hurt enabler, and it's going to hit the unit behind it on its own team. So the units like Camel and Triceratops, we've got Echidna and Markor. Of course, you can also just use pita bread on anything as well. And then it's going to hit the opposing unit as well. So that makes it kind of useful with the ailment spreaders like Bullfrog. But also it's going to be kind of similar to the Orchid Mantis in the sense that if it knocks something out, it could then potentially remove equipment on the following unit if it was, melon or pepper or coconut. And we are doing 3 damage here instead of just 1 like the elephant. And I think that's partly because I like the idea of setting off deliberate chain reactions on your own team by feinting things. I mean, you can kind of do that already with elephant, but you have to get into the realm of mushroom pilling and so on to get 1/1 units. And I think it's an added benefit of doing a little bit of extra damage to the opposing team if they aren't also playing hurt pets close to the front. So next up we'll go to the cheetah. So start of battle, deal 8 damage to the opposite pet, which I think is exactly the same as the hawk, and remove 4 health from the adjacent pets. So this is sniping with splash damage, and so that's why the damage is the same as the hawk. I don't think it would be fair if this was higher and you're also removing 8 health guaranteed from 2 other pets. But I think this has a few other applications as well. If we're removing health from the adjacent pets, this would mean that if you were targeting the front spot, you would actually remove 4 health from your own cheetah. And so you could potentially pair that with the passion fruit so that you actually deliberately regain stats as soon as the snipe happens. But I think having the splash being health removed makes more sense, because if it's just hitting 3 units, then you're much more likely to be triggering opposing pita bread. And I think it's probably more interesting to have some kind of mind game where you have to choose between the 2 of these and position accordingly. The cheetah has actually had a bunch of different abilities and I couldn't decide which one I liked the most. I think the obvious route would be to make it a percentage-based sniper like Leopard, but I've talked enough about how problematic Leopard is, so I didn't want to replicate that. This pack also doesn't have melon or pepper, so actually dealing this hawk level damage is probably worth more in this context anyway. Now, next up we need a detect pet on this tier just to complete the set, and it is going to be Megaloceros. I hope that's the right pronunciation. I absolutely love this graphic. And so it's going to be the detect pet on this tier. It is after attack, detect, summon, gain skewer perk, if not gain melon perk, works 1 time per battle. So we want this to be consistent with but slightly distinct from the reindeer. Reindeer is before attack. So this one actually has to survive, but that does mean that you can use pita bread with it. And then if you face a summon team, instead of getting the melon, which is often kind of useless against those teams, you are going to gain skewer instead. And so you can potentially use this to spread ailments using the bullfrog. But equally, you could actually end up triggering pita bread on a unit that would rarely take it. So I felt like that was an interesting possibility. The after attack is also because of the spoonbill. And funny story that the current version on the test server of Starpack actually has a unit, the real Velociraptor, has been changed to have an ability very similar to this, except it just actually returns the perk. It doesn't have to be on the unit itself. So I feel like that is ultra strong, and I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't make it. But kind of funny that we could be getting to play with this ability quite soon. But yeah, if you can imagine this pet being paired with Megaloceros, if it gains melon, that would mean that when the melon breaks, you could end up giving it another pita bread from the spoonbill. And so I feel like that's why it's important that it's after attack instead of before. And obviously we do want to have melon available in some form in the pack. I did say with the cheetah a minute ago that we don't have melon at all, but of course this is start of battle, and so this pet will never have melon until after the battle begins. So next we'll go to a pet that has a dual purpose on this tier, and that is the bearded vulture. So this one is 4 friends faint or ejected, deal 4 damage to the front and back enemies. So this is a combination of Hoopoe, Vulture, Grizzly. We're doing the snipes like the Hoopoe to the front and back units, but we do need 4 friends to faint or be ejected from the battle. So this is designed to serve the 2 different archetypes that can actually just work together. I'm not sure if 4 friends is enough. Maybe it should be more than 4. I think on the face of it, this seems quite strong, but I think there's a decent amount of counterplay. Obviously, we have pita bread to regain health. You could counter that a bit with the ailment spreaders, but you could also just play something like Plesiosaur at the front or back in order to deliberately tank a bunch of snipes and then refill the stats on the other units. And of course the Angelfish allows us to resummon things as well. You could also play something at the back with Garlic or Dragon Fruit and then have the Spoonbill return it if it ends up getting removed. So whether or not the numbers here are perfect, it doesn't really matter. I think you get the idea what I'm going for with this. So we only have a couple left now. Next we're going to go to Paraceratherium. So this one is take rock damage, gain +3 attack and +3 health. So the rock is the symbol for being sniped. And I think this is a niche that hasn't really been filled in the game. There are obviously pets that benefit from being hurt, but this is specifically targeting units that deal snipe damage. I think the obvious one that everyone would think of is a woodpecker. So this is actually just going to regain stats whenever it gets sniped. And clearly we can also pair this with things like elephant or Ankylosaurus. And then every time we get hit, we're actually going to be growing in size. We could also play this at the front or the back to counterplay the bearded vulture, or maybe in the opposite slot to an opposing rattlesnake. And of course, we do have things like dragon fruit within the pack, which can just end up providing random snipes for any pet. I think this would just be very funny if you played against a blowfish team or something and it just kept hitting the Paraceratherium and it was just growing and growing until it gets to 50-50. Alright, here's another example with 2 different hurt teams. On the left we've got Ankylosaurus paired with Paraceratherium, and then we've also got some ailment scaling going on over here. And then on the right we have the full gold build with the Markhor, the Midas Tamarin and the Lyrebird. So there aren't any start of battle effects here. However, it is worth mentioning that both of these teams would have some shop scaling going on. So every time this team buys a perk, the Midas Tamarin is going to activate. And that means because we gain gold, the Lyrebird is going to activate as well. And then over here, we have the Orchid Mantis plus Paraceratherium combo. So anytime we buy a perk onto the Paraceratherium, the Mantis is going to attack it. And because this pet's ability is to gain stats when it takes rock damage, you could actually just scale this by buying perks onto it. As long as it was above level 2, I think at level 1 you're only going to gain attack, but at higher levels you will make a profit in terms of stats. Now, the interaction with pita bread, this was one of the things that I was a little bit unsure of, if this would end up being too strong. But I guess this kind of already exists in customs, with leech and pita, and you really don't see very many people using it, just because there are better options out there. But I think in this pack it would be pretty good for getting this unit to a very large stat line quite quickly. And of course, every time you're buying the perk onto this unit, the Mantis is also going to scale itself as well. So you're getting extreme value by buying perks onto this unit. So with no start of battle, the clash at the front happens. The Markhor gets the pita bread removed. Let's just assume that they both survive. So it gains a bunch of stats there. Its ability is to gain gold on hurt, so it's actually going to trigger the Lyrebird as well. And then the Spoonbill, because this friend lost a perk, is going to copy Garlic to the Markhor, which actually would also trigger the Midas Tamarin. So again, the Lyrebird is going off and giving more stats to the team. Now, the Markhor was hurt, so that would also mean that the Bullfrog would go off, and it's going to replace the Garlic that was just given with Crisp. Now, if the Spoonbill was a higher level, it could actually replace that Crisp with Garlic again, but let's just leave it as it is. Now, the Ankylosaurus ability goes off, so it deals 3 damage again to both the adjacent units. So the Paraceratherium is actually only going to take 1 damage because of the Garlic, and then it's going to gain stats because it took rock damage. And on this side, the Markhor's hurt ability is going to trigger again, and then the Lyrebird is going to give extra stats. And last but not least, when I saw this in the Discord, I just had to include it. and it is the Megatherium, the giant sloth. Start of battle, eject 1 sloth and gain +1 attack, triggers 4 times. And I just thought this was so funny, the idea of sloth actually being involved in a battle, but you couldn't get it on your squad using this pet. The sloths are just going to be flying off screen at the start of battle. Imagine having multiple level 3s of these and just seeing the stream of sloths flying off screen. Of course, it's a 110 stat line. It has to have 1 attack like it's Sloth Buddy, but it's a tier 6, so we've got 10 health to make up for it. Definitely a bit of a meme pet, but I think you can see how this would be pretty strong with some of the other tier 6 units. And of course, we also have the Barracuda on tier 5. I think probably the temptation would be with a unit like this to say, let's make it that it increases the odds of finding a sloth. But I think that would be kind of a waste of a slot on a tier 6. Alright, time for one last example with our giant sloth. And we've got 2 different variations of a bearded vulture team. This team on the left is going for as many ejects as possible. And then this team on the right is going to go for multiple feints. And of course you can mix and match. So start of battle, the 2 Megatheriums go off. They eject 8 sloths between them, which is going to be enough to trigger the bearded vulture twice. It's going to snipe the front and back units. This team doesn't really care if the plesiosaur gets feinted, and they've got the sneaky echidna in the back with the garlic that's going to take damage from the bearded vulture and then remove a bunch of health from this team as a result. Then the team on the left, what they want to happen is they want their basking shark here to get a lot of KOs so that it can swallow a bunch of enemy units, and then when it faints, spit them out. There's not going to be enough space, and then that's going to trigger both the bearded vulture and the barracuda. Of course, the barracuda would have gained a bunch of stats when the 2 giant sloths went off as well. And then on this side, when the plesiosaur faints, it's going to summon some tier 5s. So let's grab a couple of tier 5s. Let's put Carnotaurus in there, and then something else is going to get ejected because there isn't going to be space. The sea fan is then going to go off. It's going to buff the unit that appeared and give it Competo. So this is actually going to get converted into something else. So let's grab something. Let's put Megaloceros in just to give it a chance to be on the field. Now at this stage there's only been 1 feint and 1 eject. So this vulture on this side hasn't gone off yet. But given that we have multiple corns here, there's another 6 feints in total between these pets, plus the 1 here. So it should get a chance to go off a couple of times if everything goes to plan. Of course, the other team is prepared for that. They have pita bread here on the Megatherium at the back. But equally, because this unit is going to be quite large as a result of the buffs from the sea fan, I think there's a pretty good chance that the basking shark isn't going to get as many KOs as it was hoping for. Alright, that pretty much wraps up tier 6. As I mentioned in one of the other videos, we do still have some bonus pets to go over, and definitely some tweaks that can be made. There were also some abilities that I had to change, which I'm going to talk about as well. But we're going to leave it there for now. I hope it was worth the wait.